You are listening to the BBNI podcast, Journeys of Faith, Leadership and Life.
Welcome to the BBNI podcast. I'm Lisa Keys and I'm Chief Officer of the Northern Ireland Boys Brigade. Our podcast series is about sharing journeys of faith, leadership and life. And I believe that God has given each one of us a wonderful story to share, and sharing those stories can inspire and encourage others. At the core of everything we do in BBNI, we strive to advance Christ's kingdom, sharing Jesus with children and young people every week. I'm delighted today to welcome Rebecca McCullough to our podcast studio. Rebecca is the founder of Eden Consultancy, recently described by the Belfast Telegraph as Northern Ireland teacher turned boss, aiming to transform society's understanding of autism. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thanks, Lisa. That's the first time I've got a good little intro with the Belfast Telegraph quoted. It's quite an experience to hear.
Love a good headline, but it's quite a headline, Rebecca, actually. And before we delve too deeply into what you do and all about Eden Consultancy, why don't you tell us a wee bit about yourself?
Yeah, I guess that's a pressure of a title that they've given me, but yeah, a bit about me. So I guess in simplest terms, grew up here in Northern Ireland. I was a bit of living everywhere but nowhere. My dad's a pastor, so we moved around a lot growing up. So I'm never quite sure how to answer that question. But I then moved away when I was 18 and lived in Bath. So I moved away for uni and I lived there for 8 years. So I stayed and worked as well. So I loved it there, moved back home to do my master's in psychological sciences, and then kind of started Eden, which we'll hear a bit about later on. So I guess that's a bit of like a professional roundup. Personal me cares a lot about my friends and family. I think if you don't find me working, which I mean, I'm doing an awful lot, but if you don't find me doing that, I'm either I'm most likely found with a filter coffee in my hand by the sea, very happy, or at the gym, my like little happy places. Yeah. So that's a bit of kind of really quick roundup of little like slithers in my life.
Yeah. It's hard whenever, for you've started your own business and, trying to distance the personal and the business and, find that time. And, that leads us on nicely to talk about Eden Consultancy. So it's described on your website as changing the world for neurodiverse children by equipping their key adults with knowledge and strategies. And from the outside looking in, I'm really intrigued by that description and the fact that it is about change happens when we equip the adults. Yeah. So can you share something, just about the heart of Eden Consultancy, how you've seen that change manifest itself, and just give us a wee bit of an introduction to who Eden Consultancy is?
Yeah, so Eden Consultancy is a business that works at, exactly as you say, the focus is equipping key adults in children's lives, especially neurodiverse children's lives. So when we talk about neurodiversity, autism, ADHD, we do a lot of work about anxiety and behaviour and lots of other things. But we're very much a business that goes into trying to equip the adults in children's lives. So a day in my life often looks like a lot of training, a lot of delivering a lot of sessions to a wide variety of different people. It's something I've loved about how the business has grown, that we have a real opportunity to kind of step into lots of different spaces. So schools, but lots of youth work. We do a huge amount of youth work with just equipping youth workers and various other platforms as well. So we do a lot of work with charities who'll put on events for parents that then the parents will come to, speaking at conferences, all sorts of things like that. So, but as you said, our mission statement is changing the world around the child, not the child themselves. And I really love that. I'm really pleased with where that ended up landing, just in kind of our, I guess my dream for it, realizing that, we don't want to change or fix these children. I don't believe there's anything to be fixed. I think that's a really negative statement that goes out a lot. And actually for these children, like for example, autistic children, our aim isn't to make them less autistic. Yeah. Our aim is just to allow them to be themselves in a world that fully accepts them. And that's the difference. So if you imagine that if for key adults, whether that's parents, carers, workers, whatever, if they have a greater understanding of what anxiety is, of what autism is, of what ADHD is, and so on, then they are better equipped to then create an environment where all individuals can flourish. And that's where change happens. That's where it happens on a big scale. I think I saw that. That's nearly at the heart of why I started it. So I was a teacher in England. So I taught in a school specifically for autistic children. It was an all through school, which meant it started at the wee 3-year-olds, like nursery reception, right up until 19. And while I was there, I had the privilege of being able to teach across key stages. I started off at Key Stage 1, but I ended up teaching in Key Stage 4. And that class for me were really pinnacle because they were young people, teenagers from 15 to 19-year-olds who had really been failed by the system. And whose story could have been different if people had got involved earlier and settings had been different. And that really, really changed my heart for it all. When I was teaching 7-year-olds, they had all the time in the world. We could like really invest in them, and they were in that school for 10 plus years. When children were coming into us at 16, I really did feel like a lot of my kids had this big clock nearly hanging over their head, that I was like, we only have X amount of years to try and help them, to try and unpick all of this stuff. And I think I started to see that and be like, what if it was different for you guys? What if it had been different? And yet I feel really privileged because I know that me and my team in those years we had them made a really big difference. And they were an amazing bunch of young people. But I remember sitting one day after probably quite a tricky day and being like, this is only like 14. I only had 14 of them in my class. And I was like, they're going to be like 1,400,000 of these children all around the world, or like even in just this country. Like, how can we change this narrative? So I started to see that to change things, we had to go out. We can't just do one-to-one work all the time. That's really, really important. But at the heart of it, you need to go outward to change the inward. Exactly. So when I came back, it wasn't really the plan to completely leave. I came back to Belfast to do my master's just because it was more practical for the year. I did my master's in end of 2019 into 2020. So you can imagine that was quite an interesting time to try and get that. But in that year, I wasn't intending to stay in Northern Ireland, honestly. But I looked around and I was like, oh, okay. I think I saw it as an adult, And
was the intention to continue with the teaching at that stage?
Do you know what? I don't know.
Okay.
The intention was I didn't know. The honest answer in it is that I knew there was more for me. I just didn't know what that was.
Yeah.
So I stepped out being like, all right, I don't know what this looks like, but I know that unfortunately, people listen to people if they've got letters after their name. So off I go to get a master's and actually to get a bit of theory behind a lot of the stuff I was practically doing. So that was great. But that was then that moment that I was like, could you do this as a business? And I remember sitting like my dad's study and being like, do you reckon that would work? If we're seeing a real breakdown in the adults not knowing enough, surely if we get all the adults in certain spaces, we can then change so many kids' lives rather than me working through like one child at a time. And that was just a kind of from there, just and went for it, and here we are. So
when did Eden start then, in terms of, obviously the idea was birthed. So when did you actually start trading? Yeah,
so we officially launched as a business in October 2021.
My goodness.
So we're not even 2 yet, which is, my friends keep reminding me all the time. Every time I'm like, oh, I need to do this and I need to improve this and get this. They're like, Rebecca, take a breath. You haven't even been doing this 2 years yet.
Yeah, I get told that too. Doesn't all have to be done today, or even this month, or even this year.
But it so much has happened.
Yes,
in this really short amount of time that it's felt like I've been doing it my whole life, like genuinely. So it started then. We and from there, honestly, it just kind of really, really took off. I had been working then a year after my master's, getting into schools, doing a bit of that part-time, and then like a day a week trying to build this kind of in the background a little bit, building connections. Northern Ireland is so based on trust. And I hadn't been an adult in Northern Ireland, so I had zero connections. So I had to come back and gain people's trust. And that was really, really good. It gave me time to kind of dream and see. Obviously, with the pandemic as well, I actually realised, I remember talking to mum in their kitchen one day being like, do you know what? This, although starting a business in a pandemic seems crazy, this is actually nearly perfect, because I was like, before the pandemic, I would have said everything's about to implode on our education system, on our young people's mental health. We saw that happening. Like you guys would see that happening. Then the pandemic struck and I was like, we can't, post-pandemic, we're not going to be able to ignore this anymore. And people will need someone or something to turn to. What if I have a business that says, here's how we can help? So that was kind of where it started.
Gosh, that's amazing. And you mentioned there about environment. You're talking about this changing environment, you know, and you don't have to have, you know, a formal education in this area to know that children and young people are changing. They're experiencing struggles that, you know, we didn't have. You know, obviously I'm a bit older than you, but, you know, they're experiencing struggles that never would have crossed my radar. And you know, frighteningly, the statistics show that 66,000 pupils in Northern Ireland have some form of special education needs. And when I say frighteningly, I don't mean, gosh, that's terrible that they have it, but it's the fact that how are they getting the support that they need to be themselves, you know, and we all know what's going on with education at the minute and the challenges. So, you know, we are an organisation, you know, BB, that values and welcomes children as they are to come to us. But how can we be better equipped to help the leaders? Because it's a question we're asked all the time, and we can't do the one-to-one. You know, our leaders are dealing with, you know, groups of people. They're trying to do the best program that they can and make those relationships. But is there anything that maybe, you know, you could help us? Any little tips that you could share that we could start to introduce to really help the leaders? I
think just even going back to that, you know, just even statistic wise, if we look just at autism, one in our statistics from May 2023 in Northern Ireland were 1 in 20 children have a diagnosis of autism. And that's not the children who've been missed out. It's not children who've been misdiagnosed. So it's probably a lot higher than that, actually. 1 in 20 is a really high statistic. So even in the groups of young people you guys work with, like, the reality is there's going to be a young person there with a diagnosis of autism, probably a few with ADHD diagnosis and then anxiety disorder diagnosis, never mind anything else. So I think what we have to start to learn, and I'd love even for, you know, you guys to start to feel confident in it as well, because I hear it a lot of being like, well, we're not a specialist setting. And if I'm really bluntly honest, I think those days of that thinking is gone. We are, as you said, in a different time period. We're in a different era where I don't think that should be used as an excuse anymore. Every practice has to be fully inclusive. It's something I say a lot to teachers. You might not think you're a specialist teacher, but if you sign up to be a teacher, you actually have to be in so many settings. And listen, that's not me digging at teachers, because I also know teachers need to be supported in that 100%. But I think we just have to shift our reality. So if you're a youth worker, or if you work in BB, or I think if you work in young people, full stop, you now just have to have a mindset of I need to learn and I need to accept. So I think from that, the first thing I always say is the more you know, the more that you can help. So knowledge is really, really important, especially on these topics, because there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of myths really wrapped around, especially things like autism and ADHD. Autism is really fascinating, the way that it's grown really quickly within research. So even within the past 30 years, we have this huge, like, much more, I guess, greater understanding of what autism actually is. But there's a lot of misconceptions that come from that. So just even really quickly, I'll not go through it all, but, you know, a lot of people are still, you know, maybe saying things like, oh, back in my day, and different phrases like that. Basically my answer to that is, you're not wrong. In the 60s, autism was still seen as childhood schizophrenia, which is completely false and really damaging. And from that, that was only 60s, 70s. Like, that's not that long ago. And then fast forward to 2023, we now know that it's a neurological condition. We understand it's to do with the brain being formed and reacting to environments differently. But from that, we've got lost a little bit, and people are still quite stuck in like that kind of thinking, 90s thinking, which is really different to where we're at now. So it is really important that we know a lot more. So understanding understanding myths and misconceptions, knowing what basic facts is really, really important. I think being curious about these things, I'm not saying you have to go get a master's in it. Absolutely not. But like just being curious, listening, I guess, to podcasts like this, having just being able to like attend training, all of that stuff is really important. Going in with an open mind. If there's training on, being like, oh, I've heard about this before. Know that actually it's going to probably be quite different to what you've heard. It's really important. And looking at that, I think from a practical point of view, the best practical short tip I can do without giving you like a 2-hour training course right here and now is a phrase I like to use, which is notice and wonder. So notice and wonder, basically, I encourage everybody to do it. If you've attended or listened to any training I've ever done, I'll always end up mentioning it. So what I mean by that is if there's a young person attending BB, and there's maybe some tricky situations going on or some interesting reactions that you're like, oh, so here's 2 different mindsets you can have. The first mindset, which maybe some of us naturally, unfortunately, lean into more, is being like, that kid is so difficult. Like, for goodness sake, they never listen. They are always talking during our talk, or they're not, they were really playing up when we asked them to do something different. Like, honestly, what's going on? Like, what's wrong with them? Or like, they need to stop. So we end up at that conclusion. The flip side with notice and wonder basically goes, here I'm noticing that they're really struggling when we're asking them to like transition from activity to activity. I wonder if there's something else going on. And what that does is it creates this beautiful approach of empathy. Rather than being like, you're not listening, therefore you are. It's I'm actually noticing this quite a lot. And I just wonder, and it doesn't mean I wonder if they have a diagnosis. It also just creates empathy, and I wonder if there's actually something going on in their wee personal life at the minute. I wonder if there's maybe more going on at home, or I just wonder if they need a wee bit of extra support right now. It just changes our mindset to one of empathy rather than judgment. I think that's a beautiful place to start.
And it's a really easy thing to remember, isn't it? That notice and wonder, because I think for a lot of our leaders, there is that fear element. They
100%.
just don't know what to do. But the one thing that we have in our treasure chest, as it were, is that our leaders are there because they love Jesus and they want to love these boys and share Jesus with them. And therefore in that, I think if you're doing anything out of, you're trying because you've got this overwhelming desire to make them feel welcome and make them feel part of it, and to try little strategies and things. And, there'll be different things for different people, but it's just having that, I suppose, confidence in those little techniques that you can start to think. And, that's brilliant. Notice and wonder. We'll definitely share that beyond this podcast as well.
It's a good place to start. And I think even just an encouragement in it, and to try and take away a bit of the fear. All of our, we really talk about simplicity and consistency. That's kind of our 101 to like your equation to feeling confident and helping these young people. It's not really complicated matters. There's simplistic approaches that will help all children. So even if you're aiming it for that one particular child, it's going to help your other 32 kids. So those small approaches, simple approaches, consistently done, and then we do equals effectiveness. So it's this really big change that you'll see in the small things. So it's not, something to be fearful of, because they're really small wee things that can help everybody that will make a big change.
Fantastic. Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Rebecca, it's really good listening to you and all of the very positive things that you're saying. And, I know from, having got to know you over this past year and a half, you are a really positive person, you know, which is wonderful. But there's bound to have been challenges along the way. You know, I'm a firm believer, certainly I've seen it in my life. We have these challenges, and God uses those challenges to make us stronger and to help us to be able to deal with the next challenge but I imagine it hasn't been easy in your field, the field that you're doing, the fact that everything is constantly changing and, you know, advances with medical science, with understanding. And as you said a few minutes ago, you know, in our day, it's not like that anymore. But, you know, what can you share anything about some of the challenges you faced and maybe what God has done in that to help bring you through, or what you've learned from those challenges?
Yeah, gosh, you know, there's obviously a lot. It's really interesting because obviously, and because of what the heart of you guys are, it's rare in a podcast I get asked this question, you know, so it's always like, oh yeah, positive. But like it is the truth of starting a business sounds really fun, right? It sounds, you know, you're like, people are like, oh my gosh, amazing. Like so many times, especially probably in the past 6 months, if I'm really honest, I've been like, God, why didn't you give me something else that I could do? That meant I wouldn't have to do all of this myself. So there's huge amounts of challenges in it. Yes, I would hope that I do, and I'm glad I do come across as a positive person. I think in Northern Ireland, we're really good at being very negative. I understand a lot of the reasons behind that, but with that has become a real consequence of things not changing. When I stepped out to do this, I'd mentioned it to someone within education. And I said, oh, well, I'm actually going to go full time for this stuff I've been setting up. And they said, good luck. We'll see you back here in 6 months, because nothing ever in Northern Ireland changes. Nothing ever changes. Goodness. And I remember thinking, that's why nothing changes, because everybody thinks nothing will change.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm constantly in this conflict of hope in the darkness. And it would be a lie, especially at the minute, to sit here and be like, oh, I'm really full of hope. Like, you know, God's bigger than all of it. I do believe those things. But I'm constantly daily walking into environments where hope isn't something that exists.
Yeah.
You know, families who are at crisis point, who have been failed time and time and time again, by various systems and people. Young people who have reached real crisis points. I'm really privileged at the minute to have been working a lot within the young offenders kind of realm, and also within young people's psychiatric units. I feel really privileged to be trusted to step into those spaces.
That's not an easy space.
It's not easy.
For your own mental health as well.
Oh my goodness.
And keeping that and
the darkness catches up to you sometimes. The weight of it catches up to you. Those who walk with me personally will see and know that. My church family see it a lot. My Connect family see it a lot. The people who do life with you closely, my family. You know, the weight of it is actually very different to then like the, come on, we got this. And I do. It's not like I don't believe that. But there are times that I sit and I'm like, what if this doesn't change? Am I fighting a battle that's a bit pointless? And I think if I didn't have my faith, actually, no, I 100% know if I didn't have my faith, I wouldn't be doing it because I wouldn't see the hope in it. The reason that it's called Eden Consultancy, gosh, choosing a name for a business. I mean, I've never had to name a child, but that's what it felt like. I'm like, this is going to be what I'm stuck with forever. And I'd always thought about like growth and flowers or trees. I was having a conversation with my sister and I was like, it's like I just want it, you know, to represent of what it should be. You know, like within like the Garden of Eden, like everything being as it should. And my sister looked at me and she was like, why don't you call it that? And I was like, oh yeah, I could. And so that, I don't share that a lot, but that to me represents everything I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to play a little part in get things how they should be, to change that darkness and to change all of that, and to bring hope and to walk into places like child psychiatric units and be like, this is not the way this was intended to be for your life. And I love that. I feel so privileged to do that. But yeah, like honestly, it does. It's challenging. It's tricky. I had a word spoken of me recently that's really, really helped of the story of the child bringing his fish and loaves to Jesus and Jesus feeding the 5,000. It's really helped me really, really recently, just with some stuff I've been walking through and being like, Jesus, this is all I have. Do with it what you will. And that's really helped because I'm a fixer. Yeah. Like, obviously, I've started this kind of work. It's hard not to then try and do it all yourself.
Yeah.
And put that pressure on being like, I want to, because I do. Like, I absolutely, like, yeah, the Belfast Telegraph, that title seems a bit scary, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to try and change Northern Ireland too, right? But I also know that it's not just me doing it. I'm kind of like coming alongside God and what he has intended and what he wants for these children and young people. And I think that whole story linked with me just bringing what I have to Jesus and being like, you know, feed people that I will never even come across with what I do. Like that it will change people I'll never even meet. Yeah. And trusting him in that. Now that sounds beautiful and perfect. Like I'm really learning to walk that. I think the big thing is faith. Like starting a business, you don't know. I don't know what the next 6 months looks like. Yeah. Completely honest. Like I've got stuff in my calendar, but it's not like that, you know, trajectory of typical career that you can kind of assess where your progression's going to be, and you might get this promotion. I'm in this job. I've got this contract. It's not renewed until whenever. Like sometimes I'm just like, well, might not be here. Like it's a real day by day having to trust and even stepping out into that at the beginning was the biggest thing, was trusting God. But I realized I have to do that every day. You know, it wasn't just in October 2021. It's today in August 2023 being like, okay, God, here's my next 6 months. And for a personality type like myself, who likes to know what they're doing, but, you know, I think it's challenging.
It's the hard thing for all of us today, isn't it?
100%.
You know,
faith in the unknown.
That picture that you've just given us of, you know, coming and bringing the loaves and the fishes, bring what you can. And that's all God asks us to do, really, isn't it? Yeah. Bring what we can and he'll add the rest. And, you know, if I could give you a wee word of encouragement, I have on my office, anyone who's been in my office will know I have 2 whiteboards and on one of them I have a Bible verse about, you know, because God is at our right hand from Psalms, we will not be shaken. But then on the other one, it says, don't do nothing because you can't do everything. You know, and I would have some of the same personality traits as you, where I just want to do everything now, but we've got to start that one bit at a time.
100%.
You know, so. And
I think that is, you know, God uses those things that you bring, and I couldn't have planned where this would be. Yeah. There has been, like, I have been involved in more and things that I wouldn't have planned to be involved with for about 10 years. I think between that and probably my other biggest thing is walking into a space and being like, okay, it's that whole, like, here's what I have. Because no matter your qualifications or whatever, your age or anything, you'll always have that, why am I doing this? Stepping onto stages in front of hundreds of people, I'm like, someone is going to find out that I am a child and I know nothing. But it's just learning to be like, okay, for such a time as this, you put me here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This is fascinating. And, you know, you've shared a few wee tips there about notice and wonder. And, you know, one of the things that we do here is we equip our leaders. We have the privilege of speaking into the lives of children and young people. And we're running a training session with you, which we're very excited about. And we'll be sharing lots of information about that training session, where to sign up, when it's happening, whatever. But what could our leaders expect from that? You know, what would you say to them to entice them to please come along and be equipped? What are they going to get out of it?
I think I'm learning to say, you know, and I can confidently say I'm really proud of the workshops I create and I deliver. I know they're really engaging as well. I think when we're here training, you're like, oh, I'm going to listen to someone talk for 2 hours. And the kind of feedback I always get is people being like, oh my goodness, that did not feel like 2 hours. And I'm like, good, that's what it should feel like. So it's very much quite a dynamic thing. I'm not just going to be lecturing you about autism or about whatever with behaviour. It's going to be a really dynamic conversation that we'll have. So it will be an enjoyable experience. You will go away feeling equipped and I hope feeling confident in certain areas to be able to go forward. And I think just based on the stuff we've talked about, it's going to be able to go away with ideas, practical things that you can use immediately.
Brilliant.
Like that you don't have to go and raise money for. You don't have to go and like double check with your manager if it's okay that you go and get this, this and this. Like never am I going to have to say, because I know funding and situations are tricky and it just adds complications. So our approaches are really simple and practical, things that you could literally walk out of my session, step into a session with young people that night and do.
That's super.
So yeah, really practical, really engaging and dynamic, just being able to have conversations and go away feeling confident and that you've learned something.
Brilliant.
Hopefully.
Oh, it's going to be really useful, and we will, you know, obviously we've been talking about the design of that and making sure that, you know, there are those tips for the situations that our leaders will be in, you know, and that's the great thing because you're tailoring it to suit the BB journey and helping us to be able to do that. So we'll put lots of details about that. We're kind of coming towards the close of this podcast. I could speak to you for hours on this, but as you look back on your journey so far, Rebecca, is there one piece of advice that you wish you had been given whenever you were younger?
Gosh, it's like the golden question, isn't it?
I love this question.
I think it's a mixture. When I was thinking about this, it's a real mixture of things. I think I'm really privileged to have been given a lot of good advice, like genuinely. I think it's maybe a bit of a classic one, but not to wish that you had different abilities or giftings and wish that you were someone else. Yeah. So I grew up, I'm from a really big family of one of 5 kids in my family. So comparison happens. Yeah. I adore my siblings. We all get on really well. But I was really different. They were really academic at school. I wasn't. Okay. I probably, which is funny now that I'm now sitting in a position of like talking about academia a lot. Absolutely. But it wasn't probably until my late 20s that kind of all clicked for me. And I was like, oh my goodness, I love this. So I would constantly, you know, being like, oh, you're not like so-and-so, you're nothing like your other brothers and sisters. I'm like, great, like super. I was a creative one. I was the one who loved performing. I was in all the school plays, but I really struggled with my spellings. I really struggled with maths. I didn't enjoy science. So I felt very insecure in school settings and academia settings, which a lot of that's been healed from in my adult life. And we've worked through a lot of that. But I think don't doubt the journey and the giftings you've been given, because I look back now and see that it was all perfectly used, like all of it. The reason I can step onto a stage like the Millennium Forum, the Millennium Forum in
you step
Londonderry.
Onto the stage, but maybe not say it.
No, I know. Thankfully, didn't have to announce it, but I stepped onto that stage in front of hundreds of people. Yeah. The reason I could do that was because I'd spent my whole time at school performing and singing and being in musical theatre and throwing myself into that. None of that was wasted. Yeah. My undergraduate degree was in music. It was nothing to do with this, but all of it was used. Yeah. So I think just look at the gifts you've been given and pour into that and see then what happens, rather than wishing you had other talents, I guess.
Oh, that's brilliant advice. Yeah. You know, and that's kind of the heart of this podcast. It's about, you know, sharing those journeys of faith and leadership and life to really inspire and encourage, you know, whoever's listening, because, you know, the journey is hard and whatever you're doing, sometimes you just need that little nugget from 100%.
Someone. Yeah.
So before we totally wrap up this podcast, can you, you know, have you a word of encouragement to us? You know, so, you know, we have about 11,500 children and young people come along to BB every week. We've around 2,300 volunteer leaders across 250 BB companies, which is absolutely amazing. Yeah, you know, have you any encouragement for those leaders who serve faithfully every week and are just trying to do the very best that they can with the people that come through their doors?
Yeah, a few things actually. I think first, really simplistically, what you do really matters. Small things make a big difference. And we always talk about being the one person. You know, that's what really changes and can change the trajectory of a young person's entire life, is one person. And being that one person for someone, gosh, what a privilege. So yeah, just the encouragement of being the one person for somebody can make a huge difference. Things that you don't deem important are probably helping young people feel really empowered and confident, and loved and accepted, and will be actually forming their brains into young people who are really self-assured and will become, something that we really need in the future. I think on a deeper level, when I was thinking about this, is just an encouragement to, we have to step out to do the hard stuff. I think reflecting a little bit recently, just in spaces I've been in, I'm like, this is a very different Northern Ireland to which I grew up in. And it's not because I know things have changed, but my world changed. So I grew up super privileged, and by that, I mean, I had a family who loved me. And that's huge. I lived in a little bubble world, like reflecting back on Northern Ireland, like I'm a little like ceasefire baby, I was born in and around that time. So my memories of anything regarding or relating to the troubles within Northern Ireland are very minimal. Like I grew up in a very, in comparison, peaceful Northern Ireland than my parents did. And for that, I'm really, really grateful. However, we are now seeing real repercussions from it in our young people. And we can't deny that. Statistics, research doesn't deny it. So we have to now be stepping out into that. We have to now be helping. And instead of being like, well, that's the reason, being like, okay, so let's get really good now at this. We have to step into being the best at this. When people are like, gosh, do you feel really overwhelmed by the statistics within autism in Northern Ireland? I'm like, no, do you know what? It excites me because it makes me think we could be the best country in the whole world at this.
Amazing.
And like, if you just flip that approach, I think people might be like, well, that's a bit naive. And I'm like, or it can be something that changes things. And I think looking at that, there's areas that really need help. So a beautiful part of my job is that I'm in everything. So I'm not in like one sector. I'm in so many different sectors, which is such a privilege. With that, and linked to a lot of stuff I said, I see all the darkness. I see all the people who need all the help. I see places like yourselves, like youth work, like young offenders, all of those things that need volunteers, that need people coming to help. This work is really hard and it's heavy, which means that a lot of time the kind of timing on it is really quick. So people will leave it quite early on because of the emotional strain. That means we need young people coming up wanting to do this. And I think that would be just my kind of call a little bit is just look out into the world. And not maybe the world you live in. But the world that actually is happening. Because there's real brokenness out there and the darkness needs hope. And that's us stepping into those settings. Absolutely. We have to. And if you're listening to this as a younger volunteer, don't think that because I am young, I cannot. I would have loved to wait until I had a bit more experience to do some of the things I'm doing. But the timing, like God was very clear and being like, this is when you have to do it. So I guess look at what you've been given. It's the classic, to whom much is given, much is required. Absolutely. I grew up in a family that I have so many people who love me. I sit around a table every Sunday of family who we barely all fit around the table now. People who adore me, and a church family and friends, and it goes on and on and on. And then I step into spaces where there are young people who not one person, they don't have one person. And I'm like, instead of being like, oh my goodness, like as if I've had so many people, I look at it and I'm like, I have so much, therefore I need to pour a lot as well. And I think just a bit of a call for that. And Ireland really needs it.
Yeah. And that is the heart of our leaders,
100%.
And, I love that about, for the younger leaders as well coming up, because sometimes there is that tendency to think we're not equipped, but, God will call us 100%. And God will equip us,
And that's a beautiful thing. And I think also then on the flip side of that, people who've been doing it for a long time, it's still needed of having the people who are in those spaces who are providing hope, who are providing knowledge, who have seen it, walked it and stuck it. Like that's really important.
And the prayer support as well, because a lot of those people are such prayer warriors. I'm not saying the younger ones aren't. But when you look around your church, some of those people who are on their knees day and daily for everything that's going on.
And that's really, really important, for people in this sphere. And I have that really massively blessed my church family. I received a message even as I was coming here today from an older member in our church, and she just has been that person who says that, like, she used to be a teacher, she's retired, and she was like, I know this is my role, is praying for people who are like you in this every day, and I feel so blessed and supported by that, because sometimes I don't know what to say about the situation. I don't know how to get on my knees. So actually having people who are doing that for me is holding me up. So it's that whole family approach within you guys at BB of like all doing it, all working together, having those conversations. And I guess just then landing and ending on that encouragement of like, what you do really matters. This is like kingdom work. I so believe that if Jesus was here today, like he'd be in these spheres, he'd be walking with us. So I think always be encouraged by that. What we're doing is kingdom, and it's kingdom work, and it's a beautiful thing that we're able to do. So just encouraged by that.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you so much. It has been fantastic to chat to you today.
Lovely
and I've been jotting down notes. I have so many different takeaways, the notice and wonder, the stepping into lots of different spaces. And one thing that really just resonated was that the story could be different if people got involved earlier. And I think that's really a message for all of us, keep going on the journey of getting involved with these young people, because it may be the only person that really does get involved. So thank you so much for your time today. Really looking forward to the training. We will put all the details out and make sure that we have people inspired and attending that. And maybe we'll look again at doing a further podcast. We're going to run another series. So we're this is series 1, but we're going to go beyond that. So we'll look at doing another one in the future. But thank you. It's been great to chat to you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the BBNI podcast. Subscribe to us on wherever you get your podcasts. We look forward to joining with you next time.